then.
Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Hi, this is Nick Anastasiou, lead editor and writer on Maul Shadowlord, and you're listening to Aggressive Negotiations.
You are here with Aggressive Negotiations, the Star Wars podcast on the Nerd Party Network that examines the Star Wars galaxy from every conceivable angle, facet, and pathway that you could imagine. I am one of your hosts, Jedi Master John Mills, and here to discuss in our Season 3 rewatch of The Mandalorian, in our countdown to The Mandalorian and Grogu, is Jedi Master Matthew Rushing. Matt, are you ready to discuss Chapter 20, The Foundling, directed by Carl Weathers?
Well, I really am. I just hope that we don't end up with any unintended foundlings because I really don't have the yard space for that.
Well, you know, a lot of foundlings can be tended properly with some paintballs and some nice giant crocodile fish, and maybe, just maybe, a slightly pterodactyl-looking thingy every now and then. You know, those are the basics. But one of the basics that we ask of everybody is to pay us the only way that we ask, which is to give us star ratings and reviews at Apple Podcasts. It helps us. It helps the show. It helps people find the show. We really appreciate it very much from the depths of our hearts. You can, of course, find us on the social medias at on X, at the Jedi Masters. You can find the network at Join Nerd Party, and you can find the Nerd Party on Facebook and Instagram. So thank you, everybody, for participating and listening. And frankly, I'm really curious, really ready to get right into this episode, because last week we had our issues with the convert. There was a couple narrative challenges that we had. So I got to wonder, when you were coming back into this, even with this rewatch, was there any trepidation? Was there any like, oh, this better get better? Like, were you ready to bail on anything? Where you had, like, how deeply had the convert sort of shaken your faith in the show, as it were?
Yeah, I mean, coming back into this one in the rewatch and knowing what the episode was, you know, where we were going to touch on the history of Grogu, but at the same time, you know, we were actually going to continue diving into the Mandalorian in the sense of their culture. And, you know, we're going to get a little bit of family. We're going to get a little bit of what it's like for them to train together and the different levels. You know, they have Foundling and then Apprentice. And so I thought that was really cool, you know, and so I wasn't feeling trepidatious coming into this. I was actually more interested in the rewatch and just seeing kind of how it all flowed together, you know, and part of that is because, and I don't know, maybe that's trepidation, but we've talked a lot about this season already, that the editing story structure seems to be off in some episodes. Yeah. And so I was trying to remember, you know, how this all flowed as an episode and would it still work? And, you know, thankfully for me, I think it does. You know, we talked a lot about the idea of a whiplash in the previous episode, and I felt like there was whiplash again, but in a good way, just because this episode is so diametrically opposed to the type of issues that we were getting in the previous episode. And this seemed to be back to form. While at the same time, you know, digging into some mysteries that we as fans have had since this show began. So did you feel the same, or was there anything that kind of jumped out to you in this rewatch where you were like, oh, I don't remember it quite that way, or it doesn't hold up, or no, this is just as good as I thought it was the first time, or it's better?
The episode flows better than I remembered it, because I think that I might have been thrown so off by the convert the first time around that on the rewatch, it's one of those things where it's like, wait, I remember liking this episode, but were there still some structural problems with it? Turns out there weren't. And I want to share a story because I'm, you know, doing the Mandalorian rewatch with my youngest, who's never seen it before. And, you know, the Mandalorian and Grogu is coming out. And so making a point to go through and make sure that we see everything that she might need to see coming in. I know they're going to make it accessible for non-fans too, but I figure she'll get the optimal experience that way. And when Grogu is with the armorer and we start getting the flashes of his past, his traumatic childhood, the same way that we got when Luke, I'll just say mind melded with him in Book of Boba Fett, but also when, we encountered the Mandalorian in season 1, and every time the armorer worked, we had flashes of his childhood and everything. So there's a nice mirroring there. My youngest starts sobbing during that sequence because she didn't cry as hard as she did when she saw what happened to him in the Book of Boba Fett flashback, but she started sobbing again because she felt so bad for everything Grogu had gone through. It made her so sad that somebody had gone through something like that. And it was a really grounding moment, specifically because I think we as fans, I remember even watching the episode and I got so caught up in, oh, that's Ahmed Best. Oh, it's Order 66 again. Oh, look at all of that stuff. Oh, wait, it's the Naboo. There are all these little story tidbits that I'm so caught up in as an adult fan. It means nothing to a kid. And it was another one of those moments to remind yourself that this stuff is supposed to be connecting just on a visceral, emotional level. And so I gotta get, like, this episode winds up getting probably the highest marks of the season so far, as high as any marks I've given it, because I saw demonstrated right there with me that it did what it set out to do, which was to make Grogu incredibly sympathetic and connect with the audience, especially the key demographic you want, which is either the kid or the kid inside. So that definitely was a completely different experience watching it this time around.
Yeah, I think that is such a hallmark of, being able to do this rewatch together, and the fact that you're, doing it with the youngest Padawan, and, that does change the way in which you view Star Wars, right? When you get to watch it through other people's eyes. I don't have that same experience, but just even, showing people Star Wars who really don't know a ton about it, and then just watching them experience it, for the first time is as close as, I'll ever get to being able to do that. And it's so fun. And I love that you brought up the idea of Grogu as a character, because, I've heard this before from other people. And I think that this episode, just kind of dismantles that, is that, Grogu is basically a MacGuffin or a prop. And I feel like this episode does a great job of beginning to make him a fully rounded character, where it's like, no, he's not just going to be the cute baby anymore. We're going to begin to train him and have him begin to mature. And I liked that this episode finally gave us that, where we're going to treat him as a character who has an arc that's more than just, I need him to do the next cute thing.
Yes, and even tying into that is with Mines of Mandalore, when he goes and he gets Bo Katan.
Yes.
So this season has already had 2 episodes now where Grogu gets some serious development. And never mind the beginning of this episode, we see him entered into Mandalorian fight training with another kid. And he exhibits that same sort of intuitive battle prowess, if you will, of just, oh, you're fighting by rules, but I don't have rules, which is cute. But it's still, like you're saying, it advances the character. My question for you is, we've had Bo Katan going on her own journey in this series, in this season. Did you get the same sense of forward motion or development with her? Was that satisfying for you? Because at this point in the season, we're 4 episodes in, we're halfway in, and the Mandalorian should have an S at the end of it, because it's this season has been about the Mandalorians. Bo Katan, are you liking what's happening with her character through this?
Yeah, it's funny that you ask this question because that was the thing that I was thinking of next, is the way in which, Bo begins to have more of a part in this series. And I agree with you, in many ways, the series obviously is called The Mandalorian. And I like the way you put it, now we're kind of in this mode where it's the Mandalorians. And I think that us being able to, as fans, go through this adventure through Bo's eyes is incredibly, fulfilling as a fan, to be able to see her kind of come face to face with the children of the Watch, and honestly be kind of slowly kind of pulled in back into what it means to be a Mandalorian on a spiritual front, and not just like a, physical front, or just as a cultural front. That's the thing I'm really liking about this season, the way we're building her is that character, and where she's beginning to believe again, you might have called her basically a Mandalorian atheist previous to this because of her experiences. And now, this episode's called The Foundling, but in many ways, this episode, and I know we've already had an episode called this, but this could have been called, The Believer, or this episode could have been called The Convert, because there's a way in which you're seeing Bo Katan be converted back to what it means to be a Mandalorian on a spiritual plane beyond, everything else that she's experienced. And I think it's great. I love it. I did it work for you still, or is it something where you're frustrated that she's getting to have a little bit more of an arc here than, say, somebody like Din Djarin?
No, it's not frustrating. I think that the title of the episode works really well because she's the Foundling, which I thought is really clever because, the Foundling, we presume must be a child, but the term could easily apply to her. She's been, the idea that you found the lost and brought them in. And I think that works very well. I think what's challenging about it, and this is something where the season as a whole, again, it's trying to expand outward and world build so much with what's going on with the Empire, with what's going on with the Republic, with what's going on with Bo Katan, as well as Grogu. Yes, there are layers of complexity. They're not just doing the same thing, because people started bashing on The Mandalorian after the second season, saying, oh, well, it's just a video game. He just goes on a quest every episode, which is whatever. I mean, it's a serial series. It's, I think it's a silly complaint, but I think that there is an effort here to expand the story. And what I think happens is actually Bo Katan's arc suffers because it's only a piece of this. And I think the season would have been better served to stay focused on this. Her story, and Din bringing her in and showing the growth of, we'll get, to the armorer with her and everything, where we're going this season. And I'm sorry to jump the gun like that, but I mean, it's a rewatch. You can't help it. It's very interesting because it feels so much truer to the core of what attracted us to the show in the first place, which is very simple, focused storytelling, not trying to overcomplicate itself. And I think that we're 4 episodes in, and it's something where even just that third episode causes such a rhythmic hiccup that here I'm in this episode, I'm saying, oh yeah, this is why I came to the show. This is why I'm here. And watching it in quicker succession and having seen it before, it alleviates some of it, but it really makes the third episode stand out even more.
Yeah, I think that, you mentioning the fact that Bo in some ways is the Foundling, what I love about this is that there's a real give and take with her as a character and, her being with this covert, which is there are a lot of things actually that she knows that they don't, right? Because, she grew up on Mandalore. There's, even when they're talking about climbing to, this beast's lair, and they're like, it's too high. And she's like, well, she's basically saying, I used to shoot womp rats that size when my T-14, that's the exact same discussion that she's having with him. Like, no, that's not too hard. That's child's play, basically, is what she's saying. And so what I love is that there is this real copacetic learning that's happening between her and the rest of these Mandalorians, because she actually does have a lot to teach them about what it means to be a Mandalorian, because she's literally one of the very few Mandalorians left who lived on Mandalore, grew up there, was trained there. And I really appreciate that. And so I think it's actually a strength of the show, because what they're doing is they're bringing these two disparate factions back together. I mean, that's the other part of this whole series and season, right? We've shown these two different types of Mandalorians, and this show is kind of working to allow them to live in harmony together again. And that's, I think, really, really cool, because, you have the idea of what they were in the Clone Wars, and even there, we saw differentiation between the two factions of Death Watch and those on Mandalore. And here, we're taking all of that stuff and we're working to kind of find a new balance and a new way of life for this people who've been through a great deal. And I like the way in which they're doing it personally. I think it's actually really well done. So I got to say, I really appreciate too the idea that, Mandalorians, when they're together, they actually go off to eat, so they could take off their helmet and actually eat. And I liked the admission that, yes, you can't wear this helmet all the time. Like, there have to be times where the helmet comes off, and I guess that's also probably helpful when you want to make another Foundling. But there are these little moments that they're utilizing, and they're helping us to have a better understanding of what it means, to be a Mandalorian and the rules, especially of the Children of the Watch. And so I really liked that.
I'm glad you said that, because I think it's a good point. Just a couple of points to close out on is it shows a real inversion of what we would accept as normal, which is that we would go off and do our jobs. We would go off and do something. We'd work in the fields. We would go to the office, whatever you want to say. But the idea is the family is always supposed to come together for the meal. And they have inverted that. They're together 24/7, except when they eat. And it's interesting, because when you really break it apart, breaking bread together is the very idea of, it's a phrase that means making peace with somebody. And I think that's an interesting thing to sort of like peel apart, of the idea of isolation and why they're they're so intractable and bad at making peace, because they don't break bread together. Because that's something that, I think that's worth, thinking about, at least in those terms. But as a final question, I got to ask you, how do you feel they did? Carl Weathers is our director on this episode. The volume, was this a 100% success for you? Were there effects or background shots that didn't work? Or were you totally immersed in what was happening?
I kept waiting for a rocket ship to land and to be caught in the middle of the lake, and 3 astronauts to come out and then be on the very edge of the Planet of the Apes. No, I'm just teasing. It's very. I'm sure that this is filmed in the exact same places, what they're pulling for visually. But I think that the volume is mostly successful. I mean, here and there, I think that there are some shots that kind of stand out a little bit as like, oh, that wasn't quite as good. And maybe it's just because I've been watching the show, every week here to get ready, and you just get more used to the look and the feel of it. But there weren't too many shots that just felt really jarring in that sense. And so, 3 seasons in, I think that they're figuring it out. But also there is something about Weathers' directing here that I think might just work. Like, he really does a great job of shooting the action, especially when they're doing the aerial battles, with this giant pterodactyl thingy. All of that looked really good, if you ask me. And so I'm relatively impressed with the way in which this episode is pulled off. Because what they're doing, when you think about what they're actually trying to do here in live action on television, it's kind of insane.
I agree. I think that this is a really successful episode for those effects. I think that we've become so spoiled over time that we forget the absolutely mind-blowing nature of fighting the giant pterodactyl, and it looks real enough.
Yeah, agreed.
And it doesn't look like a Ray Harryhausen thing.
Yeah.
It actually works. And then I'll say again, the youngest, and this is something where I'll cop to it because I feel the same way. I felt so bad for those little baby pterodactyl thingies
that they bring with them.
I felt but the thing is, I felt so bad for them because, it's sort of like actually when the big gator attacks Ragnar's son or whoever it was getting, baptized in the first episode, going all the way back to that, it's like, I mean, it sucks, but I still kind of feel bad for the animal because it's just doing its thing. The animal isn't evil. The animal's just doing what it does. And it's like, I don't want the kid to get eaten. I don't want any of them to get eaten. But at the same time, it's like you feel bad at the end of it because you're like, oh, right. Now you've orphaned these 3 creatures. Oh, that's kind of rough. So that is honestly my way of saying that the effects were really effective because I felt empathy for these creatures that will never exist in any fashion whatsoever. I mean, that's tremendous character animation when you think about it. And, I think that's to be commended. But what I really think should be commended is how many places you can be found online. So why don't you tell everybody where they can contact you, track you down, and listen to you?
You don't want to know my rating, John, for the episode?
Oh, no, I don't. No, not at all.
Yeah, I mean, it's
not
true.
All.
I don't know why.
Sorry, hold on.
Yeah.
Let me give a blah, 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 blah. Really commendable. It's really commendable. But speaking of commendable, how would you commend this episode? We had a rough episode last time. Where are we on the 5-star scale?
Yeah, I think this deserves to be a 4-star. I think it's a good episode. I think they did a great job, and I'm really thankful for the work that they put into this episode. I think, especially coming off that previous episode, this is what I want from The Mandalorian. So yeah, solid 4 stars. What about you, John?
I'm actually going to give it a solid 5 because of what I was talking about, where I saw my daughter react very strongly to the Grogu bit. I love the symmetry with seeing his flashback the same way we saw Mando's flashback. I love what they're doing with Bo Katan. I love the examination of their culture in the Children of the Watch, all of that stuff. I think it's highly successful. Is it an incredibly deep episode? No, but the thing is, for me, a 5-star doesn't mean that like this is the greatest hour of television ever created. It just means Carl Weathers, rest his soul, was really good as a director for this series.
Yeah.
And I think that this is a straight up standout episode. Like if you were to ask me, pick your favorite episodes from season 3, this is in the discussion, if not the choice. Like this in Minds of Mandalore. And again, in the rewatch, yeah, I beat up on the third episode, but honestly, sort of the quality that we've gotten halfway through the season, it's not, this season at this point deserves a better rep. Whether that changes when we proceed through the season, I don't know. But at the halfway point, 50-yard line, I think we're trucking for a touchdown again. So we'll just see how those back four work out, as it were.
Absolutely. Well, John, with that in mind, if people want to discuss this episode or see what else is happening there at Kesselvania, maybe they need to know the exchange rate for Kessel coin. Or where can people find them?
Oh my gosh, the exchange rate for Kessel coin is you give me 10 Bitcoin and I will give you 50 billion Kessel coins, because Kessel coins don't exist. So I'll give you as many as you want. And I'll even sign you. You know what we need to bring back, Matt? We need to bring back NFTs. Remember?
Ooh, yeah.
That was going to change everything.
They were so hot.
Wasn't it?
Yeah.
They were so hot.
Mm-hmm.
It's the best thing.
Yeah.
So you know what? Forget the Kessel coin exchange. Give me your Bitcoin. I'll give you an NFT. How about that? There you go. I'll just write something on a piece of paper. But you can also reach me online as Kessel Junkie, social network of choice. You can honestly find me on Letterboxd and Goodreads. That's where I have the most fun online. And you can find me here on the network co-hosting a show called House Lights with Darren Moser and Tristan Riddell, where we look at the work of filmmakers through their entire career, through decades, through character types, all of those sorts of things. And you can find me occasionally with a guest appearance over on the 602 Club on the TFM network, which I know is one of the places where people can find you online, Matt.
It's absolutely true. I love being over there. John's a frequent guest, so that's always a plus. You can find me all over social media under the name MattRushing02. Of course, here on the network, I've got Owl Post talking about every single chapter of the Harry Potter series, one chapter at a time. And then, if you like what I have to say and the 602 Club is your fancy, well, there's a lot of great Star Trek talk over there on the TFM network with my good friend Chris Jones, so you can check all those shows out. But you know what, John? I think the Covert is calling for dinner, and they've brought a nice case of Corellian whiskey, so I think it's time to close these negotiations.
If you think walking drunk is tough without a helmet on, wait until you see me with a helmet on after a bottle of Corellian whiskey. Master Rushing, negotiations are closed.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.